Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Ask an OpenShift Admin here on Red Hat live streaming. I am Chris Short, host, showrunner, producer, whatever you want to call me. I will probably answer to it if it involves live streaming. I am joined today by the wonderful and always wise Andrew Sullivan and special guest Jimmy Alvarez. Hello, Andrew. How are you?
Wonderful and wise. Man, now I got to cut you a check.
Right. Well, I called Langdon professor, and turns out he's going to go be one. So if I call you something, you might turn into that. So
yeah, maybe I will be someday.
So I'll take wise. I don't want you to leave the company.
Well, thank you. I don't either. So yeah, glad to be here. Glad to see you. I know you've been going through some rough weather there in Michigan. So
yeah, it's been
happy that
it's like 2 weeks in one weekend, basically, is what it felt like to an extent. Yeah. So,
well, I'm glad that everything's settled down and you're back in the house and everything. So, yeah, welcome. Well, I'd say welcome back.
Welcome back to your.
Yeah.
No, like we did have to kind of just evac the house at one point on Sunday because it was like nothing, right? Like we had no. Like at that point, it had become like no food in the house, no nothing kind of deal. So Sunday, we spent most of the day at my sister-in-law's house. And then Monday, I spent running around trying to get access to the internet somehow, some way. It hadn't been fully restored at my in-laws and everything else. So like they were in zones that weren't supposed to have power, but they did. So it was just a mess, right? Like Monday was just a mess. So yeah, well, I've never seen infrastructure outages like this before, though, because every hurricane I've ever been through, I had a cell phone, and it worked.
Well, speaking of hurricanes and Florida and specifically Miami, so today's guest is Jimmy Alvarez. So Jimmy, not to throw you under the bus, but if you don't mind introducing yourself.
No, not at all. So thank you, Andrew and Chris. So yeah, Jimmy Alvarez. I'm a technical marketing manager here at Red Hat. So, and yeah, I know outages and power outages and hurricanes all too well. That is for sure. It's funny that you say that you never lost cell phone signal, Chris, during a hurricane, because that's the first thing that goes. So,
I must have had some special cell phone or something.
I guess so.
That thing always worked, no matter what.
maybe you got a tower nearby or something.
I mean, I was in the military, so we were constantly moving around. So
that is probably why it's military.
Yeah,
that would explain it. But yeah, so very excited to be here with you guys today.
Yeah, well, happy to have you, and I am excited for today's topic. I can see that the folks who are watching the stream are as well. We've already got like 5 questions in here, so
that's awesome.
Yeah, so we're setting up the we're putting the ball on the tee there for you to hit it off, right? So we try to play t-ball here, not baseball or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So hello everyone, welcome to the stream. So this is the Ask an OpenShift Administrator office hour. So what that means is that, like all of our other office hour streams, we are here for you. We are here to answer questions kind of on whatever it is that is top of mind for you. If you're having issues, if you have questions about OpenShift in general, whatever that may be, that's what we're here for. We also have a theme or a topic for each one of our episodes. And today that is around and Jimmy, help me out here, the Red Hat Advanced Cluster Manager for Kubernetes.
Management for Kubernetes. Advanced cluster management for Kubernetes. Yes,
I was close.
Very close.
So I won't go into details here. I will admit that this is so ACM, as we lovingly refer to it, is something that I have very little personal experience with. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot about ACM, about the capabilities, about why it is interesting and useful for us as administrators. But before we get into all of that, I do want to go through kind of our tradition here on the Ask an Admin hour of the top of mind topics, if you will. So things that we have seen come up in the last week or so, usually since the last show, or other things that have bubbled up that I want to be sure to bring up with you all, our audience, right? Trying to address real-time things that we see or that we are aware of to make sure that you are also aware of them. And the first one of those is one that hopefully isn't news at this point. You've been hearing about it for the last month, and that is OpenShift 4.8 is available. It is fully GA.
It is out.
Can go, you can use it today. I think it might even actually be in the upgrade channels if you're on 4.7. I don't remember.
Let me check.
Yeah, so I know I was able to, well, I had a 4.7.19 cluster that I upgraded to 4.8.0 RC3 using the candidate channel, but that doesn't mean anything because remember, candidate channel is not supported.
Correct.
Let's see if I can bring up the upgrade graph here.
Well, can't get into my cluster for some reason, so
you don't need to get into that cluster.
I do see it on the update. I do see it on the update channels, at least from an ACM perspective. So that's cool.
Let's see. So if I'm on stable 4.7, target version, nope, there is not yet. I think that. Let me share my screen here.
Yeah, please do.
Are you the one I want? You are the one I want. There we go. So this is the OCP upgrade graph. I'll post this link into the channel or chat there. Words are hard. So this is the official kind of way to track upgrade paths, etc. You can see here I'm upgrade path. If my current channel is stable 4.7, I'm on 4.7.19 and I want to go to 4.8.2. There is no path available. I think if we go to fast 4.7 though, we might. Yeah. So 4.7.21 is here, and 4.7.21 you can go to 4.8.2. So if you are on the bleeding edge, so to speak, if you're willing to use the fast channel, you can, in a fully supported manner, go from 4.7 to 4.8 today. So lots and lots, right? We've talked about this here on this stream. We've talked about it in the What's New stream, dedicated stream, all of that over the last month. You'll also see a number of blog posts coming out on OpenShift.com, right? Lots of stuff going on around the that release. And that happened later last night, Eastern time, Eastern US time. So this morning you should have come in and have access to those bits if you're wanting to adopt. I'll also note, so a couple of statistics that I saw this morning. So this release has or addressed almost 200 epics, right? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happened inside of there, even if it isn't necessarily always apparent, and something like 1,100 bugs were addressed.
Wow.
So be sure to read the, and if we go to docs, there is a 4.8 version of the docs now.
Nice.
As soon as my internet loads it. Be sure to check out the release notes. As always, deprecated remove features is an important one, bug fixes important ones, and known issues. I always, if you don't read anything else in the release notes, always be sure to look at the known issues before you do an update.
Yeah, I almost wish those were like first.
Yeah, I know, instead of way down here at the bottom, you probably can't even see how tiny my little scroll wheel is there, but yeah, they are there. Also note that with the release of OpenShift 4.8, OpenShift 4.5 has now rolled off the support wagon. So if you are on 4.5, I would definitely recommend that you update as soon as possible. Note that 4.6 is an EUS release, but you do have to specifically, I think there's a specific entitlement for the EUS channel. So not just anybody can use EUS. You have to have the EUS entitlement to use EUS, I think. Be sure to check with your account team if that's something you're interested in. So continuing on from last week we talked about, and just to let's go to openshift.com/blog. As always, we always have this blog post that comes out after the show, and down here we can see that we were talking about Helm. So there was an article on the new stack that came out that we talked about last week. There was also a CVE that Red Hat has released. We released this back in June, you can see. But the core of it was that there was a bug in Helm client that would send credentials to every repository as a part of the URL, even if it wasn't the right repository. So what I had mentioned then was that, hey, keep an eye on the repository, keep an eye on the clients, because we're going to update them. And sure enough, they have been updated. So I'll switch over to 4.8 here. So the docs here walk through how to update the clients. We can also go to, and you can see here, if I just copy this link out and we'll paste it into the window, you can see that latest is now pointing at 3.6.2. You can see we know that because these two are updated at the same time. So again, and let me grab this link here. I'll post that into the chat. So if you're using Helm, if any of your app teams are using or devs are using Helm, please encourage them to update that binary to the most recent version available in order to avoid that particular security issue. Can we wait for announcement blog post about new 4.8GA release? So the blog post should be out today, as far as I know.
I think.
And then we'll be following up over the coming week or so with like specific announcements around features and capabilities and going into more detail there. I think OpenShift virtualization also shipped today. I think Windows containers or Windows nodes will be updating in the next week or so. So they should be pretty close behind. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that'll all be coming out as well. So I saw a question about that in the Kubernetes Slack around, hey, there's no documentation in 4.8 for Windows nodes. Well, that's because the many of the features are decoupled from the OpenShift release. So right. Service mesh, serverless, OpenShift virtualization, Windows nodes, all of those are decoupled from OpenShift's release. It just so happens that this time OpenShift virtualization released at the same time, but that's not always true. So as those release, you'll see their documentation get added back in here. Trying to review. I see all of these questions around ACM. We'll talk about those in just a moment. So I'm not ignoring them. We see them. We'll get to them. I'm just looking for the ones at the moment that we can address real quick.
For some reason, my computer has ground to a halt. So
yeah, I saw your video was stuttering a little bit.
It's taking up all the CPU.
Imrosh, yes. So the thank you for the warning about the domain changes. So
yes.
If you aren't aware, we briefly alluded to this last week. So openshift.com/blog, and I think most of the openshift.com content is migrating to cloud.redhat.com, and cloud.redhat.com is migrating to console.redhat.com. Whereas normally, and do I have it up here? Yeah, so this is cloud.redhat.com. If I change this to console.redhat.com, I think it will work. Yeah. So this will be the new URL. So just don't be alarmed. Don't be concerned if you see that changes. It is a Red Hat domain. It is a sanctioned change. It should be a transparent change. So tomorrow or whenever that change happens, when you go to openshift.com/blog, it'll automatically redirect you over to the right place. Something about all the SEOs.
That thing.
Yeah.
That's important.
I guess. I don't know.
So it turns out I can't stream and Slack at the same time.
Gotta pay those bills sometime.
I know, right?
Right.
So the last two kind of quick hits here. So somebody asked about using a cluster-wide proxy at install time with, they asked specifically about vSphere API, but it really applies to any of the other install methods. So if I go to the docs here, so I am in the docs and I'm at the installing on any platform, right? So in the docs here, we have this configuring the cluster-wide proxy during installation. And it basically says, hey, put the proxy config into the install config-YAML. For whatever reason, they did not put this section of the documentation into the others. So like if I come up here to vSphere and I choose here, vSphere with customizations, right? There is no proxy, right? You see, I did a search for proxy and nothing comes up in the table of contents. It still applies with all those. You basically follow the exact same process of sticking that information into the install config.yaml. It'll apply it immediately and all of that other stuff. So I don't know why it's not in all of these other sections other than redundancy reasons, maybe. But it does work. It is fully supported. You can absolutely do that with IPI on vSphere, Rev, OpenStack, so on and so forth. And the last one I have got is vCenter permissions for UPI. We periodically get questions. I see folks in our internal chat and stuff like that say, my customer was trying to do this and they keep getting this error, and it boils down to a permissions error inside of vCenter. So remember, and we talked about this when Catherine was on the stream, after deployment, there's effectively no difference between an IPI cluster and a UPI cluster, other than with IPI, the worker nodes will have been provisioned via machine set. In theory, with UPI, you can absolutely go in and create a machine set and begin provisioning worker nodes, or infra nodes or whatever, the exact same way. But you have to have the same set of permissions. So I'll do the same thing here. So I'm in the docs. So if we go to installing on vSphere, and then installing a cluster on vSphere, this is the default IPI documentation. Then it has this breakout of permissions down here. Oops, I'll post that into the chat as well. So there's two ways that this is used. So one, if you have no intention of ever using machine sets with your UPI, but you do want to use the storage provisioner, you still need to have at least some of these permissions inside of here. Usually the one that folks miss is this, there's add new disk and remove disk. Those two are super important for being able to actually attach disks to the virtual machines. Also be sure to pay attention to where the permissions are applied at. So if you apply the permission to somewhere where the VMs don't end up, like I applied it specifically to this cluster or to this resource pool, and then my VMs land in a different cluster, that means that permission isn't there. So the kind of default generic answer is, just put it at the root level, but that may not be what you want. You may not want your service account effectively for OpenShift to have that much permission across all of vCenter. So just be cognizant of that. Usually the one that I think ends up biting people is they'll say, we gave you admin, and they gave admin on the, if you look in the hosts and VMs view, right, on the cluster. But over in the data center view, or the data store view rather, there's no permissions over there. So yes, they can create VMs, but you can't create disks, or you can't attach disks. So just pay attention to where these things actually need to be applied. That's all I got. So
cool.
Yeah, quick and easy, or relatively quick and easy. So cluster manager, ACM. Yeah, I said that right. Cluster manager, right?
Cluster manager. Yes, you did say it right.
So Jimmy, I know we've got a bunch of questions here. So I think before we get into questions, I want to give you a couple minutes to kind of set the stage of what is ACM, what is the role of ACM, and where does it fit in? And then we'll dig into these questions, and you may incidentally answer some of these along the way. So
totally, yeah, absolutely. So, well, let's start with what is Advanced Cluster Manager for Kubernetes, right? So Advanced Cluster Manager for Kubernetes really allows you to kind of manage all of your clusters, regardless of them being OpenShift or not. So, having multiple OpenShift clusters, right, is fantastic. But it can be a little bit of a management nightmare. Having to log into each individual console to kind of monitor things, right? Find resources, deploy applications, right? It can be a little bit cumbersome, especially in a, large environments, right? So ACM really helps you simplify that. It also allows you to kind of manage, public cloud Kubernetes clusters, right? So not only the kind of managed solutions that we provide, right, like ROSA, for example, but also clusters that you might build through a public cloud, right, that are OpenShift. So through AWS, through Google, through Azure. It just helps you kind of centralize everything. So from an administrator perspective, it really helps to have that consistency when you're building clusters, because you can build all the clusters directly from ACM. It helps you manage them, the day two operations, right? And it also helps you apply, governance and security around them, so you can have policies. We provide several out of the box to kind of get you going. and it allows you to kind of manage those policies, right? And deploy new policies. So whatever those might be, policies based on standards like PCI or HIPAA or NIST, or whatever those might be, actual policies that are created by your own company, right? So, each individual company, like for example, I was working with a financial institution here last week that had a very specific way of having namespaces, right? So when they were creating namespaces to deploy applications, they wanted a very specific namespace. So they created a policy to make sure that every single application that got deployed follow that pattern. So you can kind of see here the benefits are endless when it comes to it.
I'm going to interrupt you there because I think that is a great leaping point to one of the questions that's come up, which is RHACM or advanced cluster management and ACS, advanced cluster security. So there is some overlap when it comes to things like security policies there. So can you kind of expand on the role of each one, where they overlap, where they excel or succeed individually?
Yeah, so there is a lot of overlapping with those two. So for those, just a little bit of history, right? ACS used to be called StackRox. So StackRox was an acquisition that we did earlier on this year. Fantastic product, right? And now became ACS. So of course, with that, there comes some there's some policies and some governance and securities that overlap, right? ACS really what it focuses on is do a policy management very, very well. I mean, they do very advanced policy management. And ACM does more basic kind of policy management. So I think the overlap, it's clear, right? If you kind of need both. As a matter of fact, we have a bundle that we call OpenShift Plus that it actually includes both products. As of right now, they currently don't integrate. So there's no real integration between the two products. Too new, right? I mean, we just acquired the product. We're just going through renaming the product, right? And doing that. But there will be integrations of both ACM and ACS, right? As of right now, they kind of remain separate products just because ACS, and again, I'm not an expert on ACS. So, don't ask me to go deeper on that because I really don't know ACS. Just like, Andrew was saying he doesn't know ACM. I don't know ACS. But I do know enough that there are much more advanced policies that you can do with ACS, and it's a complementary thing on top of ACM.
So, and ACM specifically targets multi-cluster, right? I've got
Correct.
2 or 5 or 10 or 500 clusters, and I want to apply policies across all of those. Does ACS do that, or is ACS more targeted at individual clusters?
No, ACS can do multi-clusters as well. It can do several clusters. It's just it's more around they're a lot more out of the box policies and they're more complex type of policies, right? ACM does. There's 2 ways that you can do policies on ACM, right? Like you can do it to inform you that you might have an issue, or you can enforce a policy, right? Where ACS can go a little bit deeper than just that, right? It can be constantly iterating and changing and going back and forth. So it does a lot more, again, from a high level, right? I don't know. I'm not an ACS expert,
and just to put a plug in for those guys, and Chris, not to put you on the spot, they have a stream as well. I think it's monthly.
So we're working on 2 different streams. One's kind of the community focused, one's is open source, and then I think it's the first Tuesday of the month we do the ACS show.
Okay.
Cool.
But definitely subscribe to the calendar or look at the calendar and search for it as you see fit.
We'll definitely be doing a lot more of integrations, right? So for right now, like I said, it's just too new still. The ACM ship was already moving. ACS kind of coming right behind it, right? So they will be doing a lot more integrations here shortly. So, I think the bundle that we just came out with, the OpenShift Plus bundle, I think it's a fantastic, bundle that includes all the tools to really help you manage all your OpenShift clusters, right, end to end. So
Yeah, Platform Plus is nice, right? Because it's OpenShift container platform, it's ACM, it's ACS, and it's Quay or Key if you're in the UK or Australia.
Right.
Key.
So it's a really powerful set of tools that can be combined into even greater. And I know we're working on a bunch of stuff to showcase and highlight how all those things work together.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're gonna have a lot of use case driven examples that we will be publishing shortly. So definitely stay tuned for those. But so yeah, I think it will be a good idea, unless you see some other questions coming up.
So there's a bunch of questions.
There's a bunch of
Oh,
questions.
cool.
So
Awesome.
I think, so DMI 3, I see your questions around metrics. So I think we'll address that next, because I have a feeling Jimmy's going to want to demo something for that. So the next one from MR, can we sync with 2 OpenShift clusters using RHACM? And I don't know if that's like, can I deploy the same applications to 2 clusters?
Right.
Can I make the 2 clusters look equivalent, which to me sounds a lot more like GitOps? Maybe it might be helpful to understand the difference between the capabilities of GitOps and ACM.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe for that, let's go through some visuals, right? So let me go ahead and kind of fire up my my demo here. And again, my demo environment is kind of funny. I was telling this to Andrew earlier. The demo gods were not with me. We just had a release candidate last night, so I just updated it. So if you see any kind of weird things, it's just, it's a brand new release that I literally built last night. But so from an applications perspective, right, if we look at deploying, like, what we were talking about, deploying the same exact application into 2 different clusters, right? This is where we start getting into a little bit of GitOps, right? Red Hat really has a good way of doing this. We have multiple ways of doing it. By either you can deploy an application directly from ACM, based on a YAML that you have by directly connecting it into a Git repo, right? So you can literally select your Git repo URL. You can select your path, right? And you can select your branch and deploy the application, right?
You might need to make that a little bigger, Jimmy.
Yeah, a little bigger is 220.
Please.
Yeah, the only problem with going up in the size is that things might look a little bit odd, but hopefully they don't.
There's a sweet spot between odd and readable. Yeah.
Is this readable and odd? Not odd? Is this good?
I mean, I think you could go up one more and it would.
Okay, we'll go one more. We'll go 150.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that's
all right.
good.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see. Apologies for that. But so you can see here again, like you can select a pre-branch, right? A branch and a path, right? To be able to do deployment directly from Git. You also saw, when I selected the repo type, and then I'll go ahead and cancel this one. But when I select the repo type, you can also do Helm charts and object storage. So that's one way of doing application deployment to multiple clusters that will look exactly the same, right? The other way is using the GitOps, which is we leverage Argo CD. So we use the upstream project for Argo CD, and we are able to kind of, you can do Argo CD in several ways, right? So you can see here that I have an Argo CD here instance, right, with an application that I've deployed. For example, let me look at this one. This one is a good example. So you can see here that I can actually see the application. I can see that this is deployed to 2 clusters, right? I can kind of troubleshoot. In this case, again, there's some refresh issues from me rebuilding the environment last night. So it's not fully showing you all the information. It says it's not deployed, but it really is. Once you can see and troubleshoot and basically work with the application directly from ACM without having to work with it from Argo. If you feel like working it from Argo, you can launch into the Argo context. Actually, there you go. There was a sync failure. So ACM is actually reporting properly here as to what's going on with this application, right? What this allows you to do, right? Argo CD, for a lot of customers, they really use it for deploying applications, but Argo CD can be very complicated, does not allow you to really manage your clusters. So it only does one thing really well, which is application deployment, and that's it, which is fine. But if you're looking a little bit more than that, if you're going to look beyond just deploying applications and managing applications, right, and kind of being able to deploy the same application to multiple clusters, then ACM is your answer, because then you're able to kind of take labels, right, and actually deploy the application to multiple clusters. So you can see, for example, another application here that that I have. Let's see, this one, I think. Yeah. So this one is deployed to 2 different clusters. So this one is deployed to the local cluster, and the unknown cluster is that one cluster that I have that I haven't rebuilt it yet. So that's why it's short or red here. But once I rebuild my cluster with my proper label, then it will automatically redeploy that application automatically the moment that I assign a label to it. So that's kind of cool. How that works.
So that's really cool, because you don't have to do anything other than, hey, deploy new cluster. And
right.
Spin it up.
I'm going to use that to change directions on you a little bit. I'll let you finish that thought. So I know one of the things that I learned early on about ACM is it can deploy clusters for you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably where you're going next. So I guess, one, what does that look like? And Andrew's head immediately goes to, where can I deploy clusters? Can I deploy them cloud, on-prem, disconnected? And 2, from a management experience, what does that look like? And there's a couple of questions in here specifically about metrics.
Yeah. Okay. So before I go into that, let me just finish one last thought about the applications here, because it's important to know this, right? So like I was saying, right, that I rebuilt this whole ACM environment, and because I rebuilt it with a new release, right, I had to load up all these applications back up, right? So I actually leveraged a Git repo to actually reload all these applications. And because my cluster does not exist within this ACM instance just yet, I haven't imported it. That's why it shows here as unknown. But if I went ahead and actually imported that cluster, assigned that label, it will just automatically deploy. So think about how easy it is for you to get up and running again if you have a failure, right? A cluster failure, massive cluster failure. You'll be able to get your application up and running very quickly. So something to keep in mind when talking about that.
You inadvertently answered another question in chat that I had already answered in chat, which is, you can, awesome. if you have an existing cluster, you can absolutely import it. Yep.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about clusters and managing clusters, right? Which is what the administrators will really be caring about. So you can kind of see here, I have a couple of clusters that I've deployed. Let's walk through the create cluster flow. It's pretty straightforward. You can see here basically all of the different types of cluster platforms that we support. So obviously we only deploy currently OpenShift clusters into all of these other platforms, right? So AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, VMware, vSphere, which is a large amount of our customers that run OpenShift. We can also deploy into the Red Hat OpenStack platform, right, within a local environment, and then bare metal. So lots of options when you're building clusters as to where you're going to deploy. Of course, as I mentioned earlier on, you're able to import any type of cluster that you have. So as long as it's a wow.
The dog is very happy about something. So
the dog is very excited. It's okay. It happens. So you can import any different type of clusters, right? So if you build a native AWS cluster, right, you can bring it into ACM and do some management. Granted, there is a limited type of management that you can do, but you can still deploy applications. You can apply policies and all of that, right? But to build a cluster is pretty simple. I select, the platform that I'm going to do. I have some credentials that I need to configure in order to obviously, deploy these clusters. You can configure as many credentials as you want for as many platforms as you want. So pretty easy there. Then you provide some cluster details, right? So say my new cluster, right? You can add this to a cluster set, and I'll go into what cluster set is in a minute. It's very, very, very cool. So hang tight there for me. And then of course you can pick your release image. This is where also you can kind of start seeing the integrations with the rest of the platform. So we were talking about the OpenShift Plus, for example, that includes ACM, ACS, as well as Quay. You can see here that we're pulling images directly to Quay. You don't necessarily have to use Quay. You can use your own image repo. ACM also works in offline, disconnected type of environments. So for example, telco use cases where you want to just deploy clusters offline, as long as you have a repo that ACM can access, then you can deploy clusters, right? You can specify any labels here. So you can, I've been using, it is a free text field. So I'll be using just simply environment, can type today equals prod. All right. And the beauty of this is that you can turn on and turn off the YAML. So you can kind of see as you're building this, right? You can see the YAML updating. You can select, obviously, whatever region in the US you want to deploy this, right? One of the cool features about OpenShift 4.8 is the single node deployment, right? And from an ACM perspective, we support that as well. So for, again, telco use cases, a single node might be something that it's useful, right? Or there's many other use cases, but that's one that just comes up on the top of my head.
That single node itself is still tech preview, but it's really cool that we're already supporting it across all these things. I also want to highlight that I think it's awesome that if you can see the YAML there, it's using Hive behind the scenes.
It is,
right.
To do
all of these cluster deployments. So yeah, that to me is really awesome as well. I really like this. It builds the YAML and shows you too. So that way, if you wanted to, you can simply copy and paste it out.
Exactly. That was going to be my thing right at the end, right? Like you're getting a little bit ahead here for me, but that's perfect. But I can actually go in here. So for the workers pools, right, I can set this to 0. And as long as I have my release image for OpenShift to be 4.8 and above, right, I'll be able to kind of just have one master node. Again, tech preview, but it works already. We're already supporting it. Networking type, right? I'm not going to get into that. This one's pretty interesting. So with ACM 4.3, which will be released here shortly, I am showing you something that's unreleased yet, but 4.3 will be released here in a few weeks, within a week, actually. You'll have the ability to integrate your cluster builds with the Ansible automation platform. So if you use Ansible today, right, and I know, Chris, you are an ex-Ansible guru, so this one is for you. We can actually go ahead and integrate and do pre and post jobs. So, for example, I can pick an Ansible job template, right? You can add one here. I'll show you how that looks, right? But it allows you to run an Ansible job in 2 phases. You can do it during the installation phase. You can do a pre or a post. And then you can also do it through an upgrade. So if you're doing an upgrade of your ACM or your OpenShift cluster, then you're able to run pre and post tasks. So you can imagine the possibilities here, endless, right? So you can integrate, some use case examples. You can integrate this with, say, ServiceNow to be able to kind of open up a ticket to make sure that your cluster, as you're building your cluster, right, there is a ticket saying, hey, I built a brand new cluster, right? Is it okay? You can have a pause and wait until that ticket gets approved before it actually goes and provision the cluster, right? Which, it might be useful for a lot of organizations, right? So the possibilities are endless here, what you can do. Another use cases I can think of off the top of my head is vSphere. When you're building clusters, OCP clusters on vSphere, you need to set up DNS, you need to set up a lot of things that not necessarily related with the build of the cluster, but they need to happen, right? The administrative tasks that need to get done. You can automate all of that through this, right? So you can integrate it with Ansible automation platform and automate all of that. right? So
I've seen folks do some really cool things with that too. Like I talked with one customer who was creating custom operators to interact with their external resources. So I have a storage operator. I think they were using NetApp. So they used Ansible to create an operator to interact with their NetApp storage device so that when they went to create a new cluster, they created a new object in OpenShift, which created a new volume on their NetApp, which then added it into vCenter. And then when they used Hive to deploy the cluster, it used that new data store specifically for that cluster. Like just
that's
really
awesome.
crazy, really interesting stuff, around what folks are doing there.
Yeah, I mean, people often forget that, just because we can very easily now build these clusters, right? There are a lot of things underneath the covers that still need to get done, storage, networking, right? Firewall rules, you name it, right? They need to get done underneath the covers to make sure that you can provision these, right? So, all of those tasks that are mundane, that are repeatable, that an administrator has to manually sometimes do it, you can automate them now with Ansible and ACM, and you can integrate them seamless, right? So as Andrew was mentioning, obviously all of this is Hive. I can actually go ahead and take all of this and copy it, right? I can copy all of my cluster YAML for my cluster definition as well as my installation configuration. And I can take this and put it into a Git repo. So now, if I'm building clusters and I want all my cluster images to be exactly the same, then there you go. I'll have that. All I would have to do is just come in here, copy and paste, off we go. That's it. Simple.
You can get kind of meta there, right? Of you can deploy clusters now using GitOps to then use GitOps to deploy applications into those clusters.
That's right.
And
it's what we call Inception.
Yeah.
For those of you who remember that movie, fantastic movie. If you've never seen it, highly recommend it. Really great movie. All right. So as we go back here and we get redirected, so my cluster is now being built. I have a couple of other clusters that are still kind of building. This one was trying to run a pre-hook because I had selected my Ansible and it failed. I wanted to see that, right? I wanted you actually to fail. So that's fine. We'll go dive into that, why that failed here in a minute. But what I wanted to talk about here is some technology preview things that we're adding with ACM 2.3 that will interest a lot of administrators. One of them being the cluster set. So cluster sets really allows you to kind of take clusters and kind of group them together, right? To do things like access, role access, right? So for example, if you want to segregate, say specific clusters that, perhaps somebody, say your dev team has access to, but maybe, another dev team might not have access to, or another QA team might not have access to, right? You can do that with cluster sets. You can also do things like deploy Submariner. So now we can actually, and for those of you that might not know, Submariner, it allows you to have direct networking between OCP clusters. It's an open source project that very cool, allows you to kind of really have that great communication without really having to open and configure much more networking, right? You can come from here directly and actually install that into a cluster. So I can actually say, I want my local cluster, right? I can specify all my configuration here and deploy, Submariner. It also allows you to, like I said, have access groups, and we follow the same access groups as OCP. So whatever is configured within your OCP cluster, right? You can have all your different users. You can do it by group, and we have the same roles, right? So either a cluster set admin or a cluster set view. So you can either see it or administer it.
All of this, the Submariner thing, that integration is really cool to me. That's something I'm excited about and wanting to play with. That one of those mythical days when I have free time. I think it also opens. I know, right?
Yeah.
I think it also, and Mariano kind of prompted a question here around continuous cost optimization and application placement.
Mm-hmm.
Like once we start talking about like cluster groups that now have Submariner between them and all of this other stuff, is there any integration with like cost management or other tools to say like, oh, this cluster, which is using maybe spot instances instead of on-demand instances, right? I want to shuffle application workload over there automatically. And then if those spot instances start getting reaped by, AWS or Azure or whatever platform I'm using, keep deploying them or redeploy them onto one of the on-demand clusters or something like that.
Right. So currently we do not have any integrations with cost management, unfortunately. As for the viewers, right? So within cloud.redhat.com, there is what we could have the cost management tool that allows you to see your OpenShift cluster costs, right, regardless of what cloud it might be, right? But currently we do not have an integration with it. We are working on integrating into that. The first step, you got to remember also ACM is kind of like a fresh product. Really been on the Red Hat market, right? Because it used to be a product from the IBM portfolio that kind of we brought it into Red Hat just because it made more sense. It's been like almost a year and a half, so we were working mostly with and prioritizing the platform integration first with Ansible, because we felt that our customers, will be using that more to automate some of the tasks that we talked about earlier. But integration with costing is coming. We do have one cool integration here that I will want to show here in a second with Red Hat Insights. So we can actually integrate with Red Hat OpenShift, whatever it's called, Red Hat Insights for OpenShift, I think it's called. I don't know.
I think
somebody
that's right.
Clarify the name. I clarify the name for me. We have too many names, too many acronyms to kind of keep track of everything, I feel. But we do have integration with that it allows you to see any kind of issues, any kind of problems that you might have with your clusters, and I'll show you that in a minute. So, but yeah,
just
let me go
FYI
through.
For the audience, sorry to interrupt you, Jimmy. We will be talking about Insights next week with John Spinks.
Nice.
Awesome.
So
perfect.
yeah, we'll be diving deep into that.
Perfect. So we'll definitely be talking about, you'll be talking about Red Hat OpenShift for Insights, I believe it's called.
Yep. And I want to make sure, because we've got 15-ish minutes left, I want to make sure that we hit DMI3, their question about metrics across multiple clusters. Yes. And I know we touched on kind of the down low side of things, the in the weeds back when we had the who is it, David or Brian Bodwin on, where we talked about Thanos and all that other stuff. So seeing the other side of that now, I think will be interesting. But
I just want to get through this last part of clusters because it's very important, and then we'll go and talk a little bit about metrics. So cluster pools. I wanted to talk about this because we're really excited. Again, this is another technology preview thing, but basically what this allows you to do is create pools of clusters that can be sitting on a hibernation state until you bring them online, right? So think of this use case of you wanted to perhaps scale up your clusters or your applications, right? Due to a high demand season, right? So maybe you have a lot of traffic coming into your application and you need more clusters behind it to be able to do that, right? So with ACM now, you have the ability to take these.
Oh, we lost your audio, Jimmy.
Audio gone. We got you. Something else tried to connect to his device.
That happened to me recently. I connected a set of Bluetooth headphones to
everything
the
is so close
TV,
together. Yeah.
And my kids turned on the TV and it hijacked my audio. Suddenly I was listening to, I think my daughter was watching She-Ra on Netflix or something.
See, I always use the wired connection because there's no Bluetooth involved. That way I know for a fact it won't just jump devices on me. And like it's happened before, and that's why I've done wired only from this point. Yeah, analog will never go away, says Emrosh in chat. That's pretty much true.
Yeah, Apple likes to think for you, which I've found to be a little bit dangerous at times.
Yeah, I mean, it just works, not necessarily the way you want it.
Let's say I recently switched to using Apple TV, and I discovered that if you have AirPods, apparently you don't have to connect them to the TV. You can have them connected to your phone, which will connect to the TV, and then you can have audio from your TV through the AirPod. And I recently showed my mother actually that, hey, you can use your laptop and your cell phone together to make phone calls.
Yes.
And so Apple, thanks Apple for thinking for us. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. So I'm kind of looking through the chat here to see if there's any questions. So one, I saw it's Valaki. Apologies if I'm completely mispronouncing names. Does Advanced Cluster Manager come bundled with OpenShift, or is it a separate product with a different license/subscription model? So the answer is both yes and no. So I answered this in the chat, but to verbally answer. So if you're using Platform Plus entitlements, then ACM is included for those clusters. If you're using the OKE or OCP entitlement, then it would be an add-on. And you can have, and we talked about this. I don't know if we've talked about it. I think it's in the subscription guide, which I saw Imrosh link to, where you can have an OPP cluster, right? So an OpenShift Platform Plus cluster that is, connected into ACM. You can have other clusters that are individually licensed, all connecting into the same ACM. And also ACM is considered an infrastructure workload. So you can deploy an OpenShift cluster that does nothing but act as a hub, if you will, for an ACM deployment. And there's no OpenShift entitlements associated with that, unless you're also hosting other, application workload on there. So, effectively, if you need those resources in order to do the management piece and all that other stuff, then it's certainly an option. There was another question I was going to answer in here.
Can you hear me now?
Hey, we can hear you.
There we go. Finally, I apologize, Apple products. Anyways,
no worries.
Let me just go through this real quick. I know that we have less than 10 minutes left.
Do we have a hard stop today, Chris?
We do not. So
okay.
Please feel free to take it.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right. So just very quickly, I wanted to go through the hibernation. So as I said, being able to take clusters in and out of hibernation, right? So think of this for spot instances or any other type of instances that you'll be able to kind of take and just kind of hibernate, put them away, so they're not actually spending money and having them up and running, but then you can bring them into the cluster pools. So for scaling out on applications, things like that, it's really cool. Now you can actually do this all through here. You can scale your cluster pool. So right now, for example, I have my cluster pool to 2 instances. I can go and scale it, say I'm going to go ahead and add a third instance, right? And it will automatically go and start building that instance for me. I don't have to configure, go through the installation guide, nothing. It's already based on the first cluster that I build, the first cluster pool that I created is going to continue using that same configuration. Of course, I can update the release image as well. So you can select a new image. So if there's a new image of OpenShift that you want to start using instead of an older one and keep the same parameters, then it will do that, right? It will leverage it using all of that. So cluster pools, it's a fantastic way of kind of managing your clusters, taking your clusters in and out of hibernation, right? So and bringing them into the pool for deploying an application. So if say this cluster is hibernating, and I want to bring it, I have a new application that I want to deploy, then I can just assign, the correct labels, and the moment that cluster comes online, it will get that application instantly. So really cool way of managing your clusters there. And then finally, the Discover clusters. This is also pretty awesome. So if you are using the cloud.redhat.com OpenShift container platform over there, you're able to kind of discover those clusters and bring them into ACM now. So you can actually manage those clusters directly from ACM. So another cool way to be able to bring those clusters. You can kind of see here some of those. We have them all by GUID, right?
And so, just out of curiosity, to tangent for a moment, does ACM work disconnected?
It does.
Oh,
it does. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, but yeah, it does work disconnected. You can have it
completely isolated. Again, ACM installs within an OpenShift cluster as an operator. So you can have, the operator install completely offline, and then you can deploy clusters as well and manage them as long as you have access to your offline repos, right, for the images, right, obviously. But all right, so somebody to ask earlier on about Thanos and the ability to have metrics. So our metrics, we do things, as I mentioned earlier, we do have integration now with Red Hat OpenShift for Insights, or Red Hat Insights for OpenShift, one of the two. But it's basically using Insights in the bottom, right? And you can see here, if I go into my clusters real quick, and I'm going to go into my local cluster, you can see here in the status when it loads up that it's identified a CVE issue, right? So this is kind of like what Insights does. Insights looks at CVEs and risks and whatever there might be, security, configuration, health, performance, anything in between, and it brings them up for you to be able to see what's going on, right? You can click on it, see what the issue is, how to remediate it, right? Again, RC bill here does not have not painted this just yet, but you'll be able to see all of the issues that might be with that cluster. So that's one way that we do, kind of monitoring for your clusters. The other way is through Grafana. So if you notice on top here, we have a link to Grafana instance. And basically what we provide you is an out-of-the-box dashboard with a lot of information about your clusters, right? So everything from how the API health is, the API server health, the etcd, the memory, CPU, right? And you can see all of the information here. You also can go into your dashboards over here, and we have a brand new dashboard that we are building for this release, which is the resource optimization um, graphic that allows you to kind of see what's going on with your clusters and how you can optimize this cluster. All of these, you can also create alerts. So if you wanted to build alerts for, say, a certain threshold that your cluster is gonna go over, you can build an alert and integrate it with Slack, for example. So you're able to kind of create alerts and automatically have it go into a Slack channel, say, hey, you have an issue with cluster A, cluster B, cluster C, whatever, right? You can create queries, you can build your own custom dashboards, pretty much everything that you can do with Grafana, right? You can do it with you can integrate, once integrated here with ACM, you can work with it, right? So it is Thanos underneath the covers, but Grafana is like what really visualizes, help you visualize this.
Makes it all pretty.
Mm-hmm.
So Daniel asks, he's using ACM 2.2.1 and is wondering if the detecting or showing CVE functionality is new with 2.3.
It is. It's a
Nice.
brand new 2.3 functionality. So yes.
And I wasn't sure, is it learning or getting that information from Insights, or is it just finding that information itself?
It is getting that information from Insights. So, you do need to have your cluster register through cloud.redhat.com in order for you to be able to see that information. So yeah.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so we have like 1 minute left. So let me go over the governance just very quickly, right? Because I know there were some ACS questions and things like that. So
yeah, and don't be afraid to spend a few minutes if you want to get through
Go
something, because we don't have a hard stop.
We don't need
today,
to stop unless you do. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, it should be okay for another 10 minutes or so. So, all right, so going into the governance, right? So you can kind of see here, I have a couple of policies that I have deployed. I have a certificate policy, right, that I have deployed. And you can kind of see here that all of my clusters are compliant. I can dive into that and see what the actual compliance is, right? So I can see all of my details. I can actually see the YAML. So you'll see the same recurring kind of theme throughout the product, where the YAML is always forefront, right? So it's always there for you to be able to kind of take this and move it into a Git repo if you wanted to, right? To kind of help you kind of keep all of these policies. As a matter of fact, out of the box, we have a Git repo that you are able to kind of get you started with policies, right? So if you go to the open source project, which is Open Cluster Management. By the way, another thing to note for 2.3 that is important, we're finally open source. Yay.
Hey,
so,
that's awesome.
yes, that took about a year and so, but
Yeah.
yes, now we are fully open source. So yes.
Amazing.
Amazing. So you can see here that we have two different kind of policies that you can kind of grab from. So you can grab them from the stable folder or the community folder. So obviously, as the names kind of allude to, the community is for everybody that want to contribute to putting any kind of policies in here, and in the stable ones are the ones that we provide out of the box. But you can kind of see here, maybe it gives you an idea of what some of the stuff that you can do, right? So for example, gatekeeper. Gatekeeper is the gatekeeper operator. It's a fantastic way of enforcing policies, right, within your environments. We can actually come in here and install the operator directly from ACM, right? So we already kind of provide you the raw YAML here. So I can go ahead and copy this YAML over here, go to my ACM, and let's create that policy. See, so you guys see how easy this is. So I'm gonna go ahead and paste all of my YAML in here, and automatically pre-populated everything except my namespace.
Right.
So I'm gonna go ahead and associate that with my policies namespace. And you'll see here that the remediation type, there's two types of remediation, right? Inform, which allows you to just report the violation, say the violation, there's a violation, and enforce will automatically go and actually enforce it, right? And it will continue to enforce it, even if, so say the cluster goes offline, right? For whatever reason, you recover it, you bring it back online, you have that same label assigned to that cluster, it will automatically go and apply that policy when that new cluster comes online. So it's pretty cool. So go ahead and click create, and just like that, it's actually going through and deploying that gatekeeper configuration. Another thing to note here for 2.3 that's new is another integration with Ansible. Yes, Chris, more Ansible. So you can actually come in here and actually configure an integration, pre and post integration with Ansible, right? So I can select my Ansible credentials here. I can select my job. So, whatever job you're gonna run here, and you can save it. You can add any extra variables. You can actually schedule it. So the way this works is that you can manually run it. So it runs once. It can run once the policy is detected there's a violation, or it can disable completely the integration. So from an ACM 2.3 perspective, now we have a full end-to-end integration with Ansible automation platform. So from the cluster building, right, all the way to governance and security and application deployment, it's all there. So this is great news for those customers that want to look into enhancing and integrating again with those third-party data center tools. So you'll notice that my cluster violation here, I have a violation of what's going on. My cluster is not compliant, right? Why is it not compliant? Well, there's no operator here, but no, for policy for gatekeeper. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back to my policies here and change my my enforcement level to actually enforce, right? So I'm gonna enforce that. And then in a few minutes, it's going to go ahead and go through and deploy the gatekeeper operator. So think about, the possibilities of this, right? If you have custom build operators, Andrew brought up a great point about a NetApp operator that automatically created, a storage within a storage device, right? To be able to deploy, clusters or whatever. You can actually go and build a policy here to do that. You can also do, many of the out of the box policies that we have, right? As I talked about, we have all of these standards out of the box. So, I'm not going to go ahead and read them all, but you can take a look at it on the screen here. We have all the different categories. Again, all of these categories, all of these standards, and all of these category standards are all based, around OpenShift. So, great way to be able to do that.
Is that relying on the compliance operator behind the scenes?
No, it's
No?
not.
Okay.
This is its own. We have our own compliance engine, but you can use the compliance operator and or OPA. As a matter of fact, I have a policy here to deploy the compliance operator, and we also have one out of the box within my repo here. So you can kind of see here my compliance operator, right? And we provide you with some examples, like, for example, Essential 8, which is a standard security profile, right? That you can actually go and kind of gets your feet wet, right? Into policies, because this is a whole new world, right? When it comes to policies, right? And it can go very deep.
I was just thinking that we should probably have a stream with Kirsten to talk about all the layers of security and all of, because I mean, we said this at the beginning, right? There is some overlap. So understanding what each one brings and when it's appropriate and that type of stuff, I think will be enlightening.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and like the security features of just OpenShift by themselves versus what this adds, like that whole conversation. Like we basically just did that on the Level Up Hour, talking about, yes, OpenShift has all these security things in place, but you need to actually have multiple layers of security around your cluster, including down to the container level. So yeah,
right.
Don't just rely on SCCs and SE Linux to kind of get the job done. Make sure your apps are good too.
And that's a thing, right? Or that's part of the thing, right? Of the whole defense in depth and multi-layers, because like those are important for like enforcing and ensuring, strong isolation between those processes. But that's not the same thing as applying like access policies and all of these other controls, and as well as securing and hardening the rest of the cluster and aspects. So Jimmy, I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to touch on or cover.
No, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, besides obviously the new kind of look and feel, right, of ACM, it looks a little bit more, we switched now to pattern fly, so it's a little more look and feel similar to what OCP brings. So consistency. What a concept, right? So and then we kind of move some menus around, right? So we now have our credentials. We have a main credential screen where you can configure not only your credentials for all of your providers, but also for OpenStack, vSphere, Bare Metal, and from the automation and all the type of credentials like Ansible and things like that. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I didn't get to go into the visual web terminal, but those of you that have used ACM in the past will know what that is. It's just basically a visual interface that allows you to interact with your clusters without having to open a terminal window. So you can just right from here do it.
Always love that functionality right there at your fingertips.
Yeah, it's all based on GUI too. It's pretty awesome.
I just deployed the web terminal operator in my 4.8 cluster this morning. So
yeah, it's nice. I like it a lot.
Yeah,
I encourage every admin to consider installing that.
Yeah, well, it'll make it easier for the for like the streams and stuff as well, because now I only have to share a browser window.
One window.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I know we're running a few minutes over, so thank you for our audience for staying on with us. So, Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate. This has been super helpful and enlightening to me. I've been meaning for a while to deploy ACM and start, using it for the stuff that I do internally. So maybe this will be the proverbial kick in the pants that I need. So thank you again. Really appreciate it. Audience, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, if there's anything we didn't address, please feel free to reach out at any point in time. You can contact me via email, andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. Or you can contact me on social media. So Twitter, Practical Andrew, which is the same, so no space or anything as you see in the chat if you've been watching on the streams. Aside from that, I know that tomorrow the GitOps Guide to the Galaxy is happening. I think I saw Christian posting about that. But Chris, I'm sure I know you've posted the calendar in there a couple of times. Be sure to subscribe to the calendar because we've got a bunch of stuff coming up that I think is all relevant and important.
Yes, yes. And we'll be discussing troubleshooting Railboxes in the next show, which comes up at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. So Scott McBrien and I will be breaking and fixing Red Hat boxes.
Very nice. I specialize in breaking things, so
as do I.
So do I, actually.
So thank you again very much, everyone. Please join us next week, where we'll be talking about insights for OpenShift with John Spinks. And until then, have a good rest of your day, rest of your week, and as Chris likes to say, stay safe out there, especially you, Chris.
Yes, I will try to follow my own advice.
Yeah, I saw the picture you posted earlier where it's saying more storms in your area. So
yeah,
best of luck to you.
Please don't.
Good luck. Good luck.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, everybody.
Take care, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.